okay, y'all. I'm used to like doing the work from behind. I'm not really good at like addressing the public, so I want you all to bear with me. So first of all, my name is Elisheva Johnson, and I work with a group called SeeChange, and I also work with another organization called Michigan United. I am the I'm one of the founding members of SeeChange. But I'd like to talk to you a little bit about like my journey and how I've gotten here. So thank you all for coming out. It's really good to see the community is ready to embrace the change that is needed in our community. You know, I've been doing this work for about 4 years with Michigan United. You know, way before the school to prison pipeline was a catchphrase or it was cool, I was the one having conversations with people in their homes, listening to stories of things that their children were going through. Before I get into that, I'd like to tell you about some of those house meetings we had. We had about 12 meetings, one youth-led meeting. And in all of those meetings, we had some on the north side, we had some on the south side, we had them on the east side, all over the different sides of town, even on the west side, where we went into homes of community people, regular everyday folk like you, and we talked about what it was that we needed to live and survive in Kalamazoo. What would, if they could paint a picture of what was perfect for them, what would that look like? Families were being stricken with homelessness, poverty, and countless families were living through the issue of mass incarceration. Did you know that 1 out of every 3 black men are locked up? That 1 in every 6 Latinx men are locked up, as opposed to 1 in every 16 white men, for the same types of issues, right? There are 2 million males, black males, locked up, more than ever, more than were in slavery. We have 7 million men under correctional control. We have 20 million people out trying to get jobs. And the likeliness of a parent being targeted and in the incarceration system, it was about 11.4%. It started to be apparent to me after having all those conversations with people in the communities that we had some issues going on. But our first issue was transparency. You see, first of all, most of you don't know that last year we actually did not make the mark. And we're one of the lowest counties in the state for our children being able to accept and use the promise and then go out into the world and get jobs. What we found was that children were being suspended more times than their counterparts. And we know that children that are suspended usually end up in the pipeline. I'm gonna come from behind there. It just doesn't feel natural to me. Take one from I got a big mouth. I'm an organizer, right? I started talking to children and families and asking these families, what's happening in your neighborhood? What's happening in your neighborhood? What do you want us to see? What do you want to see changed? Hence the name. We asked over 200 students. We had more than 10 research meetings with people all around the community, leaders, elected officials. We took children into a meeting with Margaret O'Brien. She didn't show up and my kids were mad. It's folks like you who we needed about 8 months ago to be in a meeting with us where we sat at the school board and addressed the school board with 10 families whose children had been suspended or sent home. And the cause was that these children were not going to be able to use the promise that they had been promised. Now I'm going to let you know that I am one of the people in the community that have let those children down. But here's a spoiler alert. We all have let these children down. All of us. When you see that someone has been murdered on a street corner and it does not bother you, well, we have a problem in our community. When you see that children don't have anything to do, they're not being able to get jobs because their parents are taking the jobs that they would have had, and that they're poverty-stricken. And most of these children are waking up not knowing where they're going to go home to or what they're going to eat after they get out of school. You see, a lot of times, these children eat at school. We ain't going to even talk about what they're eating. It's horrible. And so many of our children are medicated and separated out from the other students. They're made invisible. Their voices rendered unheard. And we all sat by and let it happen. All of us. I'm asking you today to not get defensive when I say that I need people with privilege to show up to a school board meeting. Because you all vote. My people are so apathetic and do not believe in the system anymore because the system has let them down over and over and over, and now it's letting down their children. We are letting down our children. Our children. So I'm asking you today to look at yourself and ask yourself, are you having conversations about race? Are you being a support to someone who's struggling to understand what's going on with their children in school? Are you one of those people who are struggling to understand what's going on with your child in school? Then I'm saying that we should band together. This is not a time to be separated. You see, race is a social construct that was built to separate us. It's really invisible. We are all humans, and I'm not saying that we don't see color. We definitely see color, okay? We definitely see color. But what the powers that be want us to do is separate ourselves and not believe that we are part of the problem. And if you have been sitting around and children have been dying, children have been hungry, children are not graduating, children are not getting jobs, then you are just as a part of this problem as the powers that be are part of the problem. So we at SeeChange, what we have done is we understand that there must be policy changes. That there just can't be meetings where we meet to meet. I like to fellowship. It's all good. But right now, this is a serious moment in time where we have to set aside our differences, look at what we bring to the table, and find our spots in this movement. So I'm here to ask you, are you all ready to see change?
Yes.
Are you ready to see change? I'm ready to say that no child should be left behind, and that's for real. For real. I'm here to say that no child should be hungry in Kalamazoo. We are Kalamazoo. I am here to say that I will be the first to look at myself and ask myself what it is more I can do, just as I'm asking you. So I thank you for taking the time to listen to me today. I thank you for taking the time to not see me as a black woman up here, as to see me as a community leader, someone who knows that I have to do this work because I have to, but I need you all to know why you have to as well. So I'd like to ask Magic, George, Dominique, Tammy, could you all come up here? Breon, Angela. This is my team, y'all. In ProKzoo right now. Right now. And I'm asking for all of your help. Thank you.
All right. How's everybody doing in this nice roasty, toasty room? All warm and cozy and comfy together? And thank you so much, Jen. So yeah, my name is Kelli Redman. I'm from Griffin Place. Give you a sign. Go back. Thank you. So my name is Kelli Redman. I'm the Restorative Justice Program Manager with Griffin Place. And we're here to talk about the school to prison pipeline tonight. So we know that we are suspending minority students at disproportionately high rates, right? We know that when students are suspended, they are so much more likely to be suspended again and again, end up violating laws, and end up in the prison system. We know that what we're doing right now isn't working. So Griffin Place has a restorative justice program in schools that I'm going to talk about in more detail a little bit later. But first of all, the mission of Griffin Place. So how many people have heard of Griffin Place? Show of hands. I thought so. So we're a large organization. We're probably, the next slide. We're most well known for our crisis services probably, but we have a wide variety of programs. There's a local crisis line that's open 24/7, 381-HELP. We're also part of a national suicide hotline. We also house 211, which is an information and referral line, and we house that locally and then for the state of Michigan after hours. We also do a lot of suicide prevention work, so it's pretty likely that one of those avenues is how most of you have heard of Griffin Place. But we also have this restorative justice program. So we have a restorative justice program, and as I mentioned, we've been doing restorative justice work in Kalamazoo Public Schools since about 2008. But we're going to talk a little bit first about what restorative justice is. So restorative justice, it's about a paradigm shift. We're moving away from thinking about justice as a way of controlling people to thinking about justice as a way of engaging people. So we know that when people are engaged in emotionally and socially healthy ways, that they're going to make better decisions. They're going to know their inherent value as a member of a community, and so they're going to be more aware of the harm that they could potentially cause people. So this is what the research shows, right? That we make better choices when we are treated like a person. I know, right? Simple so far, we're all on the same page, right? So here's the paradigm shift, you guys. So on the left-hand side, that's what our punitive justice system asks us, right? So punitive justice, the criminal justice system, the traditional method of suspension and expulsion. What that system asks is, what rule was broken? Who broke the rule? What are we going to do to punish them, right? That's how we do things. The central assumption behind that way of thinking is that punishment and fear of future punishment is going to deter future misconduct. We know, based on years of statistics, that that's not true. Like that, it's not working, right? That's what the school to prison pipeline has shown us. So what restorative justice asks, we ask who was harmed, what are their needs, and whose obligation is it to repair the harm? So it's a simple difference, but it makes a huge difference on the ground level, right? So the central assumption behind restorative justice is that by strengthening relationships and holding people accountable for actually repairing the harm that they've caused in a real way is what's going to deter future misconduct. So that's what I was just talking about. When we're treated like people, when we believe in our own value because other people do, then we're gonna make choices that are in the best interest of the community typically. And one thing I want to say about that is that teenagers get this stuff. Like, that whole paradigm shift can be really hard for adults, because by the time we reach adulthood, we're used to that punitive system, right? We are used to sort of saying like, well, someone broke a rule, we gotta punish them somehow. You can't just let people get away with stuff, right? And that mentality gets so ingrained in us by the time we're adults. When I train kids in this stuff, they're like, Kelly, we get it. Like, you can stop telling it. Like, we got it, you know? We got it the first time. This makes sense to them. So teenagers tend to be really responsive to these processes because it makes a lot of natural sense to them. So what does it look like in practice? So what we do in the schools, and this can be done in communities alongside criminal justice systems as well, but what we do in the schools is we actually take people who have caused harm and people who have been harmed in a particular conflict, and we bring them together face to face to have a conversation about the conflict, what their needs are, and how the harm is going to be repaired. Now, one key piece in this is that it's the students who decide what needs to happen to repair the harm. So essentially, the students are deciding their own consequence, right? And it tends to be a lot more effective because you have student buy-in. And so when students are saying, wow, I'm being asked for once, like what my experience of this was, and you're actually going to listen, they open up. And they're so much more able to engage in an authentic way in creating a really good solution to the problem because they know they're being trusted and respected. So we get them together face to face. Everyone around the table has an equal voice. Everyone's treated with dignity and respect throughout the process. So that's huge. Teenagers can also sniff out when an adult does not actually respect them, right? Like they're looking for it. And you can't really blame them because teenagers, especially our youth of color, are told every single day by society, no, stop talking. No, you don't matter. No, I don't want to know what your experience is. Listen to me, listen to me, listen to me, right? That's what they hear from adults all the time. In restorative practices, we sit down, and here I am, a white lady sitting down in the schools, and I'm saying, I'm going to be quiet, and you tell me. You tell me what your experience of this was. Tell me how you've been harmed. Tell me how that's affected you, your family, your community. How do you think your actions have affected others? How do you think they feel? Let's talk about it, and I want you guys to tell me what's going on, and you guys decide what your solution is. So there's a high level of support provided to all participants, and as I mentioned, it's the participants who decide how the harm will be repaired. I hate this slide, but just a little terminology. As this stuff gains more visibility, which it has been for about the past year, you're going to hear the term restorative justice, you're going to hear the term restorative practices. They're often used interchangeably. Slight difference, restorative justice is the philosophy, restorative practices are the means by which the philosophy is applied. So in schools, we have things like healing circles, peace circles, restorative conferences and mediation, which is primarily what Griffin Place does in schools, peer-to-peer models, such as peer mediation, which we also have in Kalamazoo schools, among other things. So the 5 main characteristics of restorative practices, it's all about relationships, right? So I'm sure you guys have gathered that from what I've said so far. It's about the facilitator building respectful, authentic relationships with students, and then students focusing on their relationships with each other. It's about respect, responsibility. So one big critique that restorative justice often gets from people with a more punitive mindset is like, well, where's the accountability? Like, if there's no punishment, there's no accountability, right? We know that that's not true. When you sit around a table with a teenager or a kid who's done something to hurt someone else, and they have to sit across the table from the person that they have hurt, the kids are not jerks, guys, right? Like that is hard to do. And the level of accountability that is present in that exchange is a lot higher than just getting suspended and getting a vacation for 3 days, right? Restoration, so it's about restoring relationships, and reintegration. So this last one is huge. So when kids are suspended, what happens? They're gone for 3 days, little mini vacation, they're sitting on Facebook and the conflict is festering further and nothing has been resolved, nothing's been fixed. And they come back to school, and what is their identity or their self-perception coming back to school? Oh, I'm the kid who gets suspended. Like, okay, you know, my community said I screwed up, they don't want me here, I'm gone, fine, whatever, right? So with restorative practices, there's a process of reintegration where we are giving students a voice and saying, what do you want your identity to be in this community moving forward? By the end of this restorative process and this, you come to an agreement with the person you've harmed, there's usually a piece of that agreement where the student is able to say, you know what, this is who I want to be in this community moving forward. So I think to repair this harm, I'm gonna start volunteering with Big Brothers Big Sisters, or whatever it is, right? There's often a piece like that. And so we're giving students an opportunity to choose their identity in the community moving forward instead of just slapping an ineffective suspension on them. Oh boy, this graph. You guys like graphs? I don't. So basically, I'll just hit this real quick. So with the punitive system, so the vertical axis we have control, which is limit setting and discipline. The horizontal axis is support, being nurturing and encouraging. So a punitive system is high in control, but it's low in support. You're doing something to someone when you suspend them, when you're using a punitive measure. Being neglectful is when you do nothing. You're not doing anything for anyone. That's ignoring a problem, pretending it's not there, hoping it goes away. If you're being permissive, you're being really supportive and encouraging, but you're not holding anyone accountable. Also not effective, right? With restorative practices, we're doing things with people. We're giving youth of color a voice and saying, yeah, let's do this together. You guys are the ones with the conflict, you got the issue, what can we do with you to support you in choosing how to make this right? So why use restorative practices in schools? There is a ton of research out there. I left a bunch of resources on that back table if anyone wants to do some digging about the data behind this stuff. The Michigan Department of Education actually has an awesome page that I listed in the resources as well. But the data shows that it improves the school environment, enhances social emotional learning of youth, promotes safety, inclusion, respect, positive relationships. We have a lowered reliance on detention and suspension, decline in disciplinary problems, truancy, dropout rates, all of this stuff. These huge disservices that we are doing to our minority students, all the studies show that the restorative justice can help to improve those things. So, this is really exciting. So in the summer of 2016, House Bill 5619 passed. It's the Michigan Restorative Justice Law. Raise your hand if you've heard of it, because very few people have. Yay, some of you have. Awesome. So the Michigan Restorative Justice Law, the law seeks to eliminate the zero tolerance discipline policy across the state, which is amazing. So the law says that before schools choose suspension for students, they have to offer some sort of alternative consequence for certain types of infractions. And they recommend that restorative justice be the alternative that schools offer. So they actually have a great toolkit on the Michigan Department of Education website that actually spells out pretty clearly how to implement a strong restorative justice program in a school. Has a lot of resources there as well. So Griffin places restorative justice programs in KPS. So I mentioned this, we've been doing restorative justice in some form or another in Kalamazoo Public Schools for almost a decade. And that program has lived through several incarnations. It used to be largely volunteers, it sort of ebbed and flowed over the years. I've been with the program for the last 2 years, and it's been all paid staff since I've been with the program. So in the high schools, we have youth conflict resolution specialists from Griffin Place who facilitate restorative conferences and mediations. So they're actually sitting down with students. Let's say there's been a fight, in the halls or something. Once there's a little bit of a cool down period, students are sent to the Griffin Place person there at both K Central and Loy-Norix, and they have the opportunity to sit down and resolve that conflict together. Not always the same day, and a lot of times those students are still sent home for that day if there's actual physical violence that happens. But we do a lot of reintegration mediation in the high schools. And in elementary and middle schools, we have a peer mediation program. So the peer-to-peer model of restorative justice is where we actually train students to facilitate and mediate conflict. It's a pretty awesome program. It's really big in youth empowerment. And so we have that in some middle and elementary schools in KPS and in Battle Creek. And then a Griffin Place person oversees that and supports the kids as they do that. We also offer restorative justice conferences as needed to any school in the district. So even if we're not regularly stationed in a particular school, KPS can call us from any building. Any administrator or teacher at any level can call us and say, hey, we have an issue, can you guys come help us out? And we'll come in and do that. So, go back to that last one. That's okay. You're too good. So this last one, this suspension diversion program, this is something that we're still in conversation with KPS about. But I have some really good news, and that is that Kalamazoo Public Schools has taken this Michigan restorative justice law really seriously, which I've been really pleased to see. And that has not been true of every district across the state. A lot of districts are still kind of like, what was that law again? KPS was on it. I mean, so they are, so since I don't work for KPS, I can't deliver in great detail what their plans are, especially since we're still in conversation. But I can tell you that in response to that law, students facing suspensions for certain offenses that meet certain criteria are going to be given the opportunity to participate in a restorative practice instead of being suspended. So that's great news. And it's not the full picture, but I'm really happy that they're taking steps in the right direction, because this kind of work takes a huge financial and time investment, and KPS is taking steps to move that direction. So here's some data from our program in Kalamazoo Public Schools just this past school year. So these are the total number of cases referred. That's cases that were referred both to our peer mediation program, the one that the kids facilitate, as well as the ones that we facilitate on our own in the high schools. So we had 453 referrals total. Of those, 325 went through to mediation. Now, the gap there, the ones that didn't go through to mediation, maybe the kids declined the process and didn't want to use a restorative practice. Maybe it was something that was not appropriate for mediation. Sometimes in cases of bullying, you have to be really careful, and facilitators need to be really highly skilled and well-trained and able to determine if there's a power imbalance that's not going to be able to be overcome in mediation. And in some of those cases, it's not appropriate to re-victimize someone and put them in the same room as a bully. So that's why you see a little bit of a gap there. But of those cases that went through to mediation, 298 were mediated to agreement. So that means that 92% of the restorative practices that we facilitated K through 12 in Kalamazoo last year, the students were able to come up with an agreement that they both felt good about. So these are some student survey results. So every single student who goes through a restorative practice with us takes this survey. Here's just some of the data from it last year. So that one all the way to the left, I've kept my part of the agreement. So we want to know, sure, these kids write these agreements, good for them. Do they uphold them? 94% of them do, or did last year. The one in the middle, I think the agreement will help stop the problem from happening again. 88% say, yeah, I think that this problem is never going to come up again. And the last one, if I have another conflict, I'll choose mediation again. So 87% of students who go through a restorative practice with us say, yeah, I would choose this again over fighting or violence. Social emotional learning is huge, right? Elisheva talked about that a little bit. Social emotional learning is something that permeates every single aspect of being a student, right, and of our development. And it's a huge part of restorative practices. So on the left, 94% of students said that after participating, they'll be more open to talking about a problem rather than turning to fighting or violence. That's huge, you guys. 94% of kids who go through this process where they're respected and where their dignity is honored, they say, yeah, like next time instead of swinging, I would talk about it. I mean, this is huge to me. On the right, after doing mediation, I feel like I know how to talk to others that I'm in conflict with in a positive way. So going through this process, by having a facilitator, an adult who's modeling some of these skills, just giving kids the space and the tools and the structure and maybe some of the vocabulary to talk about what's really going on with them and with their experience, they're learning so much from that, right? Here's another, if I have another conflict, I'll choose mediation again. 87% said yes, and 91% of students were not suspended after the mediation took place. So the most effective way to implement restorative practices in schools is something that very few districts in the country have taken on. So the whole school approach is what it's called in restorative justice world. And what that means is that we're not only dealing with conflict after it's happened, we are also doing all of these preventative restorative practices on the front end. So that means we have teachers sitting down and starting the school day or starting the week, having kids sit in circles, sitting in a restorative circle, and just checking in. It's a chance for kids to bring their whole person to the table before the conflict has happened, before something has erupted. Kids can say, hey, yeah, you know what? I had a really awful weekend, and this is what's going on with me. Or some other kid could say, you know what? I'm not in a good place today, and I really need no one to touch me. I mean, we know that kids who are living with trauma, there are a lot of triggers and a lot of things that make school a really hard place to be. And so teachers are just checking in and doing some of that preventative work in classrooms. Other things that can happen, just having staff, like school staff trained in the language of restorative justice and restorative practices. So saying, instead of saying to someone like, why are you sleeping? Like, what are you doing? Get your head up. Get your head off your desk. Let's go. I'm trying to teach here, right? So instead of that, if teachers are trained in just a different way to ask those questions, pulling someone out in the hallway and saying, tell me what's going on with you. What do you need? How can I support you? What do you need in order to meet the classroom expectations that we have here? So just getting the whole staff on board and creating a restorative environment on the front end, all the research shows that's a lot more effective than just doing the conflict resolution on the back end. Another piece is that, and this is an interesting statistic, so we usually measure we usually predict how effective implementation of restorative practices in schools will be based on the percentage of buy-in from faculty and staff. Turns out that you need at least 80% buy-in, like actual genuine buy-in of people in the building saying, yeah, I get this stuff, like let's do this. And of course, what does that require? That requires a high degree of support from administration. Teachers are under so much pressure. Do we have any public school teachers in here, by the way? Can we clap for them? Because they're amazing. Very hard job that you do. So teachers are under so much pressure. They've got to deliver the curriculum, they've got all the behavior issues, they're expected to be a parent and an educator, and all of these things, right? They don't have enough time to do it, and in my opinion, they aren't paid enough to do the job they do, right? So in order to do this whole school approach, we can't just throw this at teachers and be like, okay, now you're going to get trained in these circles, you got to do this thing, work that into your schedule. It has to truly be from the top down, full support on the district level of a district saying, we're going to transform the way we do everything because we believe in this that much, right? So here are some resources for you guys. There's a copy of this slide at the back table. That's what I was mentioning earlier. There are some awesome resources out there. There are some really good videos, and I promise they're short, which is super good. They're all 10 minutes or less, and they're listed up there as well. But if you want to see what this actually looks like in a school, if you want to hear students talk about their experience of this, check out those videos. If we run out of resource sheets, I'll make some more copies somehow. Yeah. Do we have any questions at this point? Do you want me to do Q&A now, or do you guys want me to wait, Jen? We have some time? Okay. Yes, sir.
Now, you said aside from being bought in from the top down, I'm wondering in the KPS system, is that happening at this point?
Yeah, that's a great question. So he asked you're asking if there's district level support from district administration. Yeah, so Kalamazoo has been working with us and contracting with us since 2008 to bring this work in on the conflict resolution end of things. They pay us a certain amount, and then they don't cover the full cost of the program. We have some grant funds that supplements that, but it costs money, right? So I think my sense, I don't work for KPS, I don't want to speak for them. My sense is that they get this stuff, they believe in it. They want it enough that they've asked us to continue to be there for almost a decade, right? In terms of the likelihood of like that whole school approach, changing everything around, I can't speak on their behalf. I can tell you my meetings with them have always been positive, and on the building level, we have a tremendous amount of support in the schools that we're in regularly, from the behavior interventionist staff, et cetera. So, that was a little vague, I'm sorry. Yes, ma'am.
My question is, if I wrote down correctly, you said there were probably 453 referrals to your program, right? My question is, how does that number of referrals compare to the number of events or situations that arise in the school? I ask that to say, it sounds like it's not equal, that there's still students falling within the cracks that still be on that still have a pipeline, which is what my question is.
Absolutely, thank you so much, it's a great question. So the way that our program has operated in Kalamazoo schools for the past almost decade is really been on a building by building level in terms of how much buy-in there is from that particular principal or that particular behavior intervention specialist. If we have developed a good relationship with them, then that person might be more likely to refer those cases to us instead of suspending or expelling. There has not, until this upcoming school year, been any district-wide policy saying every time this type of infraction happens, we're going to call in Griffin Place and offer a restorative practice. It's sort of been up to the discretion of the staff working in the buildings. So that's what's really exciting about this restorative justice law, and KPS's response to that is that they are building in at the district level at least some language and some policy around types of infractions that each building has to offer restorative practices for. So we're moving in the right direction, but yeah, it's been largely personality dependent, which is far from perfect, right? Thank you.
I actually go to Kalamazoo Central.
Oh, cool.
And I'm actually in the Link Crew organization in the school that help out freshmen. I never heard the program at all, and I don't think the program like that would work. Actually, I think I should be more oppressive. But my question is, how are you guys actually working to, I guess, to expand the program? Because what is it, like 298 kids actually follow through. Kalamazoo Central is 1,800, so that's not even here.
Yeah.
That's only one high school.
Yeah, great question. Thank you. So we have someone at Kalamazoo Central 3 days a week named Molly Bechtenberg, and actually you'll have a different person this coming school year because we're moving her to Battle Creek. But we have someone there 3 days a week, and like I mentioned, it depends on the disciplinary team at each school and what cases they decide to refer to us. So we're a guest of Kalamazoo schools when we work in those buildings. And so we can't make policy decisions for KPS. So the way it works at K Central is that the assistant principal, I think that's who it is there, but our contact person there, when he or she gets a case, you know, there's a conflict that comes up, they just kind of decide, like, either I'm going to handle this or I'm going to pass this on to Molly, you know, the Griffin Place person, to handle it. So we don't have a ton of control with the way that the structure is right now of how many cases we get to do. We do mostly fighting. We do mostly physical violence in the high schools. Yeah.
I also work in KPS, not for KPS, in order to make that distinction, but I also have never had access to or heard of the program, and so I'm stating that as, like, I think that hopefully we can do more work done to make that more visible and accessible to staff in the buildings. My question is about follow-up procedures. So without Griffin Place having mediators present in every single building, which you can call and have them come into the building to help facilitate the mediation, what do the follow-up procedures look like?
Yeah.
How are families involved in those processes?
Oh my gosh, good question. So we only have people regularly in some buildings in KPS, and we're in the buildings that have tended to use the program the most, right? So that's where we've been concentrating our resources. So we're only regularly in certain buildings, but then any building could call us and say, hey, we have a problem, come in and just handle this one. In terms of follow-up procedures, what we do, within 2 weeks of a restorative conference or mediation or circle, we follow up with each person who was present individually. So we check in with each student and in a confidential space and just ask them, have you upheld your end of the agreement? Has the other person upheld it? Are there any lingering issues that are still going on? And sometimes students will say, well, it's been okay for the most part, but this one part was violated by the other party. And so then we offer remediation for both of those parties. In terms of your part of the question about parents being involved, so typically we work just with students in the building, and that usually works out fine. We have had certain cases where parents want to be involved, and that's something that we can do as well. It's a little bit more complicated of a process because we have to go through an intake process individually with each person who's going to be at the table to make sure everyone has an understanding of the process and to sort of hear where everyone's coming from in advance. So it's a more complicated process when parents are involved, but they certainly can be, and we certainly have done that in the past. Yeah, thank you.
Is it possible that you can ask that this program be put on the agenda for a soon-to-be KPS board meeting?
That's such a good question.
We are going to do that.
Are we? My supervisor's here. Jacob, what do you think about that?
We have done that.
She's asking if we can put our restorative justice program on the KPS school board agenda for an upcoming meeting.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Jacob said yes. I can, yeah.
And maybe not so much questions.
Let me just get the second part first, and I'll get you right after that.
If in fact, I'm impressed with what you have said, but it also is duly noted that it's not well known, okay, hence those two reactions, and also that you say it's not working. So rather than, dismiss it or whatever, we need to problem solve to get it to work.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
I'd like for whatever person would be responsible to figure out when that would be put on the agenda or approach the superintendent for it to be put on the agenda. And then problem solve on specifically how to get a uniform policy, because that policy that leaves it to the discretion of the building leader as to what cases would be referred to Griffin Place program is the disparity.
Yep, absolutely. So I just want to say in response to that, we do know that for the students who go through the process, it is working, right? Like our data shows that it is. And so in terms of getting the word out in buildings, my position managing the program was actually just created 3 months ago. So we're in a period of growth right now. We've sort of been operating as a smaller program at Griffin Place for a number of years. And with the passage of this restorative justice law and schools kind of saying, oh, this stuff's important, we have to do this, we are getting more buy-in from schools little by little and more interest from schools, and so we are in a period of growth right now. And I would love, and all of you who work in buildings, check in with me afterward. I would love your suggestions of how to get the word out about the program better. And to your last point about needing like a district-wide policy, that is something, that's a change that KPS has made to their student code of conduct for the upcoming year. I don't have all the details of exactly what that looks like, but I know they're moving in the direction of more concrete policies.
Can I interject for just a moment, because I think I can answer some of the questions. And what the deal is that children with disabilities have what's called a parental safeguards notice. And that advises them of what their rights are as children with disabilities. And part of their rights is their rights to mediation. But this does not go across the board with children who do not have disabilities. This is mandated by law. I haven't done the research on children who don't have disabilities, but as far as I believe that laws probably do mandate this in some way. If not, then we have to insist that parents are notified of this program.
SeeChange is going to do more education for us this evening about some of those rights that we have. And as we can see, there's a disconnect between a model that we show has research behind it that will help our children. We know there's a disconnect in statistics between how low-income and minority students are treated in the schools. And I'll just mention, anecdotally myself, 20 years in mental health, punitive measures don't work to change people's behavior. We have to offer people opportunities to communicate and be rewarded for positive change. That's the only way. And if we want to see change, we've got to stand up for it, okay? So we have more speakers to come and more to learn tonight and additional training that's coming. So let's continue moving.
Like she said, my name's Amanda Miller. I've been teaching in KPS for 18 years, and I'm a phys ed teacher. Currently, I'm serving as the KEA president. So I'm really excited to be here tonight to talk to you guys because I have a passion lately, and my passion is to elect the school board for Kalamazoo Public Schools. We have been successful in electing one person so far. Her name is Lauren Friedman. She's here tonight somewhere. So basically, this passion is coming from, once I became president, I saw what was going on. I mean, being a teacher, I see what's going on in KPS, obviously, but I'm a cog in the machine, the school to prison pipeline machine. Kids in schools that live in poverty have different learning conditions than kids that go to a school that don't have as much poverty, right? Yes. We all know that. Being president, I bring concerns from teachers about their working conditions and learning conditions to the district. I many times met, our concerns are met with deaf ears. That's how I feel. Explaining the concern over and over and over and over again, and have you taken it to the answers I get? Have you taken it to the building principal? Yep. Okay, you could file a grievance. How about you do that? Sure, you could do that. But This is a nationwide problem. It is not a KPS problem. It's upsetting because it's a Kalamazoo problem. You know, we've got the narrative across the United States. Elisheva described it perfectly. They call our schools failing schools. That's not true. It's not true, and we shouldn't be punished. They test the kids, and then they punish the schools. And then they try to take them over. It's all connected. I want to tell you, we have declared a bargaining crisis. You might have heard in the KEA negotiations, and there are things that KEA did not release to the public, and I just want to share two of them with you tonight. Two things that we've been fighting for are lower class size. In the district, basically it's tied up in our contract, so we have to buy it. Do you think we can afford that? Do you think we can afford that? Do you? I don't know. We can't afford to buy lower class size. It needs to be something that we all believe in and we work towards as a goal. Because it's right for kids. Secondly, I'm really proud of this, but I'm really frustrated with this. We proposed a letter of agreement for the Alternative Learning Program. Who's heard of the Alternative Learning Program? ALP, ALP. It's a program that middle schoolers get sent to if they are not being successful in their traditional middle school. They're supposed to go there for about 12 weeks in theory and then come back into their traditional school. It's not working. It's part of the school to prison pipeline. The kids go there. It's a small classroom learning environment, and they feel comfortable there. So comfortable that they stay for maybe 2 years. They are integrating back into the schools. I'm really concerned about that. The teachers there, we keep pushing this letter of agreement to improve the learning conditions for those students. Not one thing on that letter was agreed to. It was costed out and given back to us on the table. Buy it. Buy their better learning conditions. And I want you to know about that. Those are just two things that the union is fighting for.
That ain't right.
It's not right. So what's the answer? One thing, like I told you, is, just to wrap it up, is that we need to elect our school board. We need to continue. Lauren cannot do it by herself.
Yeah.
So if you are interested, or if anyone else is interested, you know, you can see me, you can see Elisheva, talk to people on SeeChange. But it's really important. There are 2 seats up in December 2018. So we need to think about it now, because those are the people, we need people on that board that understand our district and our kids and our community. And they're going to make real change, real restorative justice practices, because I can tell you, we don't use that word in our schools. We're going to have to start. It's an unfunded mandate, and we need real training. It will work if we do it, but we need people to help push it. So, thank you.
I want to thank ProKzoo for being here, first and foremost. I want to thank all of y'all for coming out. My name is Ed Genesis. I'm an organizer with Michigan United, actually lead organizer on criminal justice reform, which is new. I started with my mentor, Miss Elisheva Johnson, who brought me into the organization at Michigan United. One of the first 2 things she asked me about, let me back up. I was born and raised in Gary, Indiana, and then moved to Kalamazoo. And if you're not familiar with Gary, Indiana, it's predominantly black. It's a small town in the backyard of Chicago. Gang violence, drugs, you name it. Okay. Oh, is that right? Gary, Indiana in the house. When I moved here, it was culture shock, to say the least. this is still like culture shock to me. I appreciate the white faces that I see, honestly, because this situation takes us all to fight together, because it's for the youth. It's not a black thing, white thing. In Gary, I had my background in religion. I grew up in church. And then I also took to the streets by the time I was a teenager. My father was murdered by crooked police of the Gary, Indiana Police Department when I was 2 years old, so I grew up without a father. My mother did the best that she could. I'm not taking anything away from her, but there's only so much a woman can do to show a young man what it is to be a man. Okay, so fast forward, one of the things that I do professionally is I do music, I rap. I would always do things with the community, pass out backpacks, pencils, so on and so forth. Elisheva, she knows me from the neighborhood and also from the things that I've done. And she came to me once and she talked to me and she told me about mass incarceration and the school to prison pipeline. And instantly I felt like I didn't know there was a name for it. So that was my first part of my intro. My second part of my intro is to announce to y'all that I'm an expert. I was told I'm an expert. Why? Because I actually went through the school to prison pipeline. I did not go to prison, thank God. I did not go to prison, but I have 3 felonies that I earned all here in Kalamazoo, Michigan. That culture shock I was telling y'all about, my attitude, my street ways, quote unquote. But unbeknownst to me, that's not what it was. I was already pushed through a bubble. Gary, Indiana schools, they were allowed to hit us with wood boards called SWATs. This happened from kindergarten till the time you graduate. We also paid book rental for used books. This is something that we knew was wrong when we were in elementary. From in-house suspension to you name it, things pile up. Okay, so now I have to say, being in Gary and being in that street life and things like that, but not wanting to be in it. I'm an artist, I like to draw, I like pretty things. However, being in that, there's only so much you can do without being attacked or making yourself a victim. I carried a gun to school by the time I was in high school. This is what I did. I had already lived in Kalamazoo and went to Norris, briefly. Didn't like it, moved back to Gary and grabbed my backpack, books, and my .25 automatic every day going out the door for school, period. This is what I did. There was no jumping me, there was no shooting me, no more chasing me. I did all of that in junior high, and I'm not exaggerating. From being shot at 13, 14 years old, to being chased, not because I did anything, but because we all were victims of the ills of poverty, absent fathers, and being in the inner city without any resources whatsoever to really think about. The boys club was one of the worst places to go to when I was growing up, that and the library. You had to leave before it got dark in Gary. Okay, so fast forward again, I get here, I got that type of mentality. I don't want to carry guns anymore because Kalamazoo is different. It was not, I can walk from the east side to the north side and not worry about those things. Nobody asked me why I wore my hat the way I did, or just trivial questions that I just got tired of. So being that I could compare it to something, I came back. I lived with my great aunt on a corner of Woodward and Patterson on the north side, and I tried to get back into Norris. My mother would tell me when I was young, even though she didn't know what the school to prison pipeline was, she would always tell me that your record will follow you. What you did in the 4th grade, this teacher will tell your 5th and 6th grade teacher, and so on and so forth. And I used to think it was, I don't know, folklore, basically. Old wives' tale, something that mothers tell their sons to keep them from messing up in school. Little did I know In order to build, this is how I explain this in my community, to my peoples when they ask me, well, what is the school to prison pipeline? Once I got the information from my mentor, Miss Elisheva Johnson, that broke down to me everything and then gave me some research and some things to look up, I put it in my perspective and I explained it to my people as simple as this. Before you can build a Chick-fil-A downtown Kalamazoo, you have to do surveys. You have to find out how much traffic will come through there, how many people you expect to buy, and put together at least a 5-year plan before you can build this. This takes, once again, surveying. They do the same things with prisons. And they get the information from the schools. In order to say that we can build a prison in Michigan and that will go up in 2020. We need proof. How do we know we can get people in those bunks? Oh, well, we know because Ed just got put out of school. Wow. So they targeted me. Okay, so when I tried to get back into Newark, no go. But we got something for you called Vine Alternative School. If you're from Kalamazoo, this was a while ago, maybe you're familiar with Vine. They literally gave the kids their smoke breaks, and this was under 18. They would let them go outside and smoke. So I'm like, wow. I didn't smoke cigarettes, but I knew that this was the bad school. I'm in the bad school, so I'm a teenager. Do you know how it feels to get put in the bad school? Like, you're bad. Like, not bad like how y'all may think bad, but bad like, hey, we going to Vine. They let us out at 1:30 in the afternoon. Are you kidding me? This was heaven. I told everybody back in Gary, guess what? They got an alternative school here that's not like the one in Gary where you can get killed at. This alternative school is fun. And they let the kids have smoke breaks. So when y'all just heard about what ALP is not turning out and things like that, this is what they're talking about. This does not work. I was not a delinquent. I was not a bad child. I was very inquisitive and and I did need man influence in my life. Once I got older, I realized that testosterone is, whoa. That with a room full of men all trying to figure out what it is to be a man, we don't figure that out till I don't know when, because this person says this is being a man, and this person says this is being a man, and testosterone. Fast forward again, and now I don't want to see my children or any other children go through those awful pitfalls that they have set up on purpose. One of the things I used to say was that the system was broken. And then I was reminded within Michigan United that it's not. It's working exactly how it's supposed to. Yeah. That's the sad part. That's the very, very sad part. The fact that I had no idea that these words even existed, and I know so many other people, mass incarceration, school to prison pipeline, which I've learned is the fuel for mass incarceration. Start them off young. Give them the same exact trades that they will carry in the penitentiary in elementary. Serve them basically the same types of food. Order them from the same places even. If you do your research, some of these prisons and schools order their food from the same places. Same size milks. You don't get a bigger milk because you're an adult in the penitentiary. You get the same 2% milk that you got when you were in the first grade. And this is real. Now, Kalamazoo County Jail, whoa, that is no joke. KPEP, a halfway house that they'll give you, if you don't have a violent crime. Now, I'm a KPEP success story. I used to do community service right out here at Bryson Park when I was in KPEP and was proud to do so. Even though I would lie to the girls that I would meet and tell them that KPEP stood for Kalamazoo Public Education Program and that we were encouraging people to get their GEDs. This is what I really did. Growing, now that I've grown to the point that I can help and give back, I just want y'all to know that what they said about out is very true. It's the new Vine. Any alternative, anything that they call alternative, you wouldn't wear an alternative pair of underwear. And that says it all. If I offered you an alternative pair of underwear, you would wonder, what's that? And that's how we have to look at it when it comes to education in our youth. And I thank